Welcome, everybody. It's the Six for Sixers podcast, and we are back. We are back. We took a little layoff, but I'm back in the building. I had to get over the hurt and the pain of that game six and oh man, dealing with all those Knick fans and how crazy and disgusting they acted toward us at our own home. Took some time to heal, and I'm back. This is the beginning of our report card era. It usually takes about a week or two to dish out all the report cards, but we're going to actually give some grades on team performance and individual roles in the organization. Just looking forward to next year. Really looking forward to this off season, which really hasn't totally begun yet. But I think we are got some good news, and Tyrese Maxey won an award for his sportsmanship, Joe Dumars Award, which was congrats to our hero Tyrese Maxey. So we are now in a better mood, or at least I am, because the Pacers took down the Knicks. And not only took down the Knicks, but they beat them in the Garden with Spike Lee and John McEnroe and Walt Clyde Frazier and John Starks and Fat Joe and Ben Stiller and numerous other entertainers waiting on the Knicks to take a game seven. And they did not. Not only did they not take a game seven, they lost by over 20 points. Now, I will say that Jalen Brunson left the game with a fractured hand. That's a big impact on the team. However, no excuses. You lost. And there's no excuses. I mean, when Embiid was playing on one leg, no excuse. We lost. And we were without DeAnthony Melton, which I've been debating online about how tremendous of a loss he was for us, definitely defensively. No excuses. Next man up. You still play to win the game, and we did not win. And neither did you, New York. And you didn't go to the Eastern Conference Finals. And you did not go to the finals. You lost in the second round. You were a second seed that lost in the second round to a sixth seed and barely beat a seven seed. So I'm okay with that. I feel a lot better that those fans do not get to cheer any further. But they're all saying our season was a success. No, it wasn't. You lost in the second round. Wasn't a success. And you were a second seed, which means you should have been able to go a little bit further, but you didn't. So moving on. Let's talk about Sixers. Six for Sixers podcast. Please like, share, subscribe. You don't have to like if you're a New York fan. Just leave that to the Sixers here, to the Sixers fans. But like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And we are going to talk about our president of basketball operations, Daryl Morey. We're going to give him his grade for the season, starting with last offseason. He's made a lot of moves, so obviously we can't cover all of the moves in 6 points, but we are going to make, to me, what were the most six pivotal points. If you have additional points you want to make, please make them in the comments, because I never can get to everything I want to say in 6 points, but that's kind of like the stick of the show, so that I'm not up here yapping and yapping for 2 hours like on some podcasts. I just want to do a quick 15-minute synopsis and I'm out of here. So point number one, I felt, and I'm going to give individual grades for these points, and then I'm going to give one general grade, that number one was the James Harden fiasco. Now, I'm giving Morey a F on the way that was handled. I've been watching basketball since my earliest recollection of the Sixers is like Daryl Dawkins, Julius Erving, Charles Barkley, just to give you Mo Cheeks, Bobby Jones, Andrew Toney. So just give you some Moses Malone. How could I forget Moses? Moses Malone, and then on into that Allen Iverson era, Aaron McKee. And so I'm not going to mention all the players, but just to give you how far I go back, and I've heard some contention with athletes and general managers or presidents or even owners sometimes, but never really quite heard a player come out and call the president of basketball operations a liar, and that he would not ever play for the organization as long as that person was in the organization. I've never really heard that publicly said. Well, James Harden, you broke the mold, buddy. He said it, and he obviously meant it because he never came back to the organization after that statement. Well, he did come back to kind of practice, but they were kind of working it out, and he knew he was going to be out of there soon enough. So I gave Morey F for that because of it just happening in general. It should be very clear guidelines and set when you are entering into contract negotiations. James Harden's contract was up. He was entering into a period of free agency, and Morey, he never said James Harden, but I guess he was alluding to the idea that he may have been signed for an extension at the max amount, and that did not happen. According to Daryl Morey, they never entered into any contract talks. But of course, they were friends, Morey and Harden. Morey rescued him from Brooklyn when Harden wanted out of Brooklyn, and they had a relationship in Houston. So they knew each other very well. And I can't say definitively, but it's just a good guess to say that they probably had some talks about something like that along the way. He probably wasn't treated like every other free agent was. He had an inside track to Daryl Morey, and they probably maybe had some discussions. Maybe Harden thought they had an understanding about what might take place in the off season with his contract negotiations. And then the game 7 in Boston was horrible last year in the second round. It appeared that Harden was not with it and B was not with it. And it did not get us to that next level that I think everybody was hoping Harden would take us to. And maybe the team reconsidered. Maybe ownership said we can't give him a max deal playing like that when the whole point is for him to get us over that hump, and he was not able to do that. So it didn't happen. But if a player is that vehemently going into the press and talking about you're a liar and he would never trust you and never work for you again, then something went wrong somewhere. And something may have been said to him. I seriously doubt that nothing contract related was said to James Harden, and he just made that statement out of the blue. So I think that it really definitely put a black eye on the season before it even started, because then we had a scramble to make a trade for a guy that not a lot of teams were really interested in. And you're not going to get any equal trade value really for him. It just put us in a horrible position. Then I'll get to some of that later, because some of those trades that we made were instrumental in the season. But then the biggest thing was it left us with a huge hole in the team, and that Harden was our point guard, floor general. And I don't think Maxey is that. I think Maxey's a two guard who I like him better when he's not bringing the ball up the floor. And now you don't have the guy who you had bringing the ball up the floor. So now it's Maxey's responsibility. And Maxey did well in that role, but I just don't see Maxey as a true pure point guard like Harden or CP3. I mean, and Harden kind of developed into it because even in Houston, he was just shooting a whole lot, and he developed more of a facilitator. So I gave Morey a F on that. I don't know what happened, but for Harden to come out and make that statement before going into any contract talks really, really damaged this season for us. In my estimation, and had us really scrambling to make a deal. So I gave him an F on that. Point number two, this happened late in free agency. Kelly Oubre Jr. acquisition. Gave Morey an A on that. Kelly Oubre had a phenomenal season for us. He averaged 15 points, over 15 points, and 5 assists per game. And Oubre brought a different dynamic of the team, some youth, some speed. He and Maxey called themselves the Meat Brothers because remember Wiley Coyote Meat, and then they just take off. So that was great. Oubre at times was a very legitimate third option, and he was a little bit streaky, but I don't really attribute that to his lack of skill or his not being involved, but it was just kind of like a lot going on. Harris would have some games where he was coming up, then he didn't, and B got injured, then B came back. And so it was a lot of changes going on, and it was really tough for Kelly Oubre to find his way amidst all that. Still averaged 15.4 points a game. Great season. And Oubre had bounced around a little bit. I remember when Oubre's playing in Washington, he played in Charlotte, he played at Golden State. And so he was bouncing around a little bit. And I was shocked that Oubre Jr. was still on the free agent market so late into the free agency period. The season had almost, it was after all the major free agent moves went down and he was still available. So that was a great find by Morey and it worked out really well. Hopefully they can keep Oubre Jr. for next season. I'm not sure. I think they can offer him the max or something that's like 12 million. And hopefully he takes it. He seems to want to stay. He gave a rousing approval of Nick Nurse after the season ended. So I think it's a good relationship. I give Morey an A on that. Great pickup. Point number three is dealing James Harden. So again, we had the James Harden fiasco. Now we have dealing him. Got to get rid of him now because he's saying he doesn't want to come back. I gave Morey the dealing of James Harden a C, and here's why. We lost a lot in Harden. We did not lose anything in PJ Tucker. That was probably great that they took PJ Tucker because Tucker just I was team Tucker too for a while, but overall he just wasn't producing offensively. Very good defensive player, tough-minded, brought that leadership to the team, but he just wasn't hitting enough of those corner threes. And really the corner three was kind of like all he had. So when he wasn't hitting that, it wasn't anything else left. And we needed someone that could provide a little bit of an offensive threat. So at that time, didn't seem to be a lot of teams that were interested in Harden. There was not a fire. This was not Harden 5 years ago. And I think that the way he moved from Houston to Brooklyn to Philly, then he wants out of Philly, it just seemed that it was, I don't know, maybe he wasn't a right fit for a lot of teams. So it didn't seem like it seemed like we might not get rid of him at all. We going into the season, thought possibly he might sit out, but we ended up losing Harden, PJ Tucker, and Philip Petrusev, which Harden was the main piece out of those three guys. And we gained Robert Covington, Nick Batum, KJ Martin, Marcus Morris Sr. Covington was injured the majority of the season and didn't play a lot. But the reason why I gave Morey a C is because he did not get any equal value. I didn't think he got equal value for James Harden. He didn't get the same type of player, which we really, really needed a starting point guard. But so that was bad, but I think that was also the best that he could do with that little bit of interest in him. Didn't have a lot of interest in Harden, the other teams. So when you don't have interest, you can't go out and get you a stellar point guard if nobody wants to trade with you. It's like you having that nice baseball card, and but your friends don't want it. Still a good card though. So that was probably the best Morey could do, but it left us with a huge void. So kind of in the middle on that little very average trade deal. Point number 4, Nick Batum, which came out of that trade deal. I gave that an A. Nick Batum's influence on the team. And Morey obviously brought him in on that Harden trade, but Nick Batum had a great impact on the team. I thought it was kind of sketchy though in the beginning because Nick Batum missed the first 5 out of 10 games for the team. I said, "Oh, this guy does," and he had announced his retirement. And I said, "Wow, he's already checked out." But boy, when he came into the games, he had a huge impact on the team. I think Nick Batum averaged about 5 points this season. However, his impact was so great. You can't even quantify it in a stat sheet. The guy just knows how to play the game. He moves in the right spaces. He knows when to shoot. He knows when to pass. He knows when. I mean, Batum had some games where he really, I call it the flick of the wrist because the way he just grab and shoot, flicked his wrist, 3-pointer from the. He was everything that we wanted PJ Tucker to be. He could defend, he could shoot, and was a real threat from that 3-point range, not just in the corner. He's moving around. He could set a good screen. He can pass the ball. He was a little bit of everything. Batum was the player that Nick Nurse leaned on to take the ball out of bounds, which seemed like not a big deal, but it is a very big deal because you need your smartest guy to make the best decisions in that situation. And that was Nick Batum. Seemed like a very high IQ on the floor. Just the way that he operated was phenomenal. So that was an A. Morey did a great job scouting him. I hope he does not retire. Embiid has already gone on record as saying that he wants Nick Batum to come back. And at one point in the season, Embiid said he's the key. He's special. He fits everything we need. Great role player, veteran leadership. So that's an A that Morey did, bringing in Nick Batum. Point number 5, trade deadline moves. I gave that a D, and here is why. Oh, I gotta read. This is hard to even talk about. So we went into the trade deadline. We all Sixer fans got desperate because we needed help. Embiid was on pace to repeat as the most valuable player, but then got sidelined in late January because of a left meniscus injury, and we needed help badly. We were looking for a savior. And what did we end up with? Our saviors were Buddy Hield, campaign, and 2 second-round picks. Not our saviors. And what did we give up? We gave up Patrick Beverly, Jaden Springer, Marcus Morris Sr., Furkan Korkmaz, Daniel House Jr., and 4 second-round picks. We gave up a lot. And when we didn't get a lot in return. We got Buddy Hield, who is basically a great 3-point shooter, not a great defender, and sometimes can be streaky from 3-point land, and campaign, who paid pretty good dividends. I like Payne and Hield. I just felt that what we gave up was too much. And some of the players that we gave up didn't even go on to play for the teams that we gave them up to, like Marcus Morris Sr., who was waived and then was eventually picked up. But he left us with a lot of things to try to fill in some gaps. and Healed and Campaign were not able to fill in those gaps. So I just felt that we did gain some offensive firepower, but we gave up way too much. That was a D because, and I'm going to get to that in my next point, it left us with a lot of holes in the team that manifested themselves during playoff time. Everything's great in a regular season. You can just watching the games, just watch the games, and it's just not the same intensity as it is in the playoffs. When you get in the playoffs, the intensity's turned up, the floor shrinks up. It's like a half court, more of a half court game, and it just teams are just throwing everything at you because nobody wants to go home. And I think that's my point number 6 is that trade deadline moves, they left some holes in the team. And so I gave Morey point number 6 for the playoff holes a D as well. The trade deadline moves came back really to haunt us. And here's why. We lacked rebounding, so we didn't have a strong rebounding presence. Embiid was injured, and although Embiid was able to pull down some rebounds, he wasn't mobile. The rebounds that he did get were ones that pretty much came right to him. And we had some games where Josh Hart out rebounded Embiid, and that should never be the case. We had some periods where Embiid's shot was getting blocked by way less uh, talented guys and guys who were way shorter than Embiid. And it's because Embiid didn't have any lift. We needed another muscle type guy to be able to get in there and help with the rebounding effort. Because a lot of the points the Knicks got was on second chance points. So I saw Marcus Morris Sr. as being really that guy to be kind of help us on the rebounding end and to provide a little bit of muscle in the paint. But he was traded. I felt that Patrick Beverly could have put a lot more defensive pressure on Jalen Brunson than anybody else on the team, around the same size and just pesky and annoying to offensive players is the type of player that Patrick Beverly is. And he wasn't around because we traded him off. I felt like those things, those holes, really contributed to the Knicks being able to beat us, especially on the rebounding end. The Knicks had a field day with second and third chance points. And obviously Jalen Brunson went off. And also Daryl Morey re-signed Paul Reed in the offseason. Paul Reed was not able to produce in the playoff series. He didn't give us a whole lot. So I don't know, just a lot of mistakes were made in the offseason and in the trade deadline. Mo Bamba was signed and Paul Reed was signed. I don't know why, because there's play in the same spot. Then when Paul Reed wasn't playing well in the playoffs, Mo Bamba never even came close to sniffing the floor. So why do you even have him? What's the point? And Buddy Hield was an inept for the first couple games of the New York series. He went 1 for 7 and didn't appear that he was really ready for that level of play. That was his first playoff series. And he showed, I guess, his nervousness, just being a little bit in awe of the moment. And then in game 6, he had came out crazy, hitting 3-pointers. But we could have used that in the first couple games. And then Nick Nurse really didn't have to bench him after only, I think, was 2 games that he didn't play well. He benched him for a couple games and decided to bring him back. But ultimately, in the press conference, Morey said he made a mistake with Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield didn't pan out the way he thought he was going to, and that he didn't produce as well as he thought he was going to. So that is in a nutshell the playoff holes and really, really put us in a bind. So those are my 6 points on Daryl Morey's report card. I'm giving Morey a grade of a C minus because I felt that there was a couple things that were done really well, but ultimately when you exit in the first round the way we did, you can't consider that a successful season. And because we had a lot of holes in our game toward the end, um, just can't give them a B or A for that. Ultimately, it's about winning. So C minus for Morey, and I'm out on that. This is the Six for Sixers podcast. I'm your host, Creek Creek, and we will be back with the next report card. And I'll say by Wednesday. Let's give it a couple days. I could really work on it. Look at the stats and what happened this year. We'll probably go to the next report. Go to Nick Nurse and give him a grade for the year. Anyway, good people, like, share, subscribe, comment below your thoughts on Daryl Morey and his moves this offseason. And that is all, people. Six for Sixer podcast. I'm your host, Creek Creek. Peace. I'm out.